I'll be blunt again, as I always am. This sort of thinking is not going to help folks at all. You're better served not to take any notice of this. We buy stuff that's unloved out of favor, which is vital for the functioning of society.
Can you update us on your thoughts around inflation, stagflation, hyperinflation possibilities? Does it get worse for the average American sooner or later? How does this affect the overall stock market, etc.? Thank you. That's from Demar.
Okay, I'll be blunt again, as I always am. This sort of thinking is not going to help folks at all. It's going to spin you'll spin your heels. You're better served not to take any notice of this. Look, we say this from years of experience. Look, I don't look like 23 anymore. You know, once upon a time I had hair and whatever. We've been around the block so many times. We do what we do now because we feel this is the best way of getting an edge. So we buy stuff that's unloved out of favor, which is vital for the functioning of society, or at least we think it is. I'd like to think we're not going to go buy Kodak film or Agfa or whatever. Okay. You know, the old Kodak moment thing. The stuff...
VHS. Remember VHS?
Yeah, VHS. What else would be like one of those good old traps, Chris?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm wondering.
I found a VHS tape in the cupboard the other day. I don't know what to do with it.
Blockbuster Video. They were listed, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So look, the stuff we're invested. So we go around finding stuff that's unloved, unwanted, which is vital for the function of society. It just so happens that this stuff we're buying now is or invested in is will do well under an inflationary environment, or at least a stagflationary environment, and probably won't do too badly under sort of deflation or whatever. So we're not specific. Say we didn't specifically go say, hey, look, we want to just be invest in the inflation theme. We had a funny feeling, but it just came to us because this is the stuff that was unloved, unwanted. And so no one's really positioning for an inflationary theme going forward. That's why we think we're probably going to get one. Anyway, the other thing is, if you're investing in the stuff unloved, unwanted, it can do exceptionally well when the S&P does badly. Look at that previous slide, well, not previous slides, going back a few when we talk about British American tobacco. It lost some 65% of its value in 1999. Where is it? There it is. Yeah, go forward one, Lucas. There we are. In fact, I think if you go back further, I think from 95, I think I originally had it, but I just cut it down. It gone nowhere. It was unloved, unwanted, and so it went down when the S&P went up, and then in the horrid bear market, it did exceptionally well. I mean, a stock going up 150% when the S&P goes down 50%, that's huge. So again, so you're buying these things that unloved, unwanted. You can sail through a bear market where the S&P falls by 50%, come out on the other side, at worst not having lost anything. You may have made stuff as well. So you don't have to worry too much about what happens to the S&P 500. We keep banging on about this, and it's like we get the same question again and again. Aren't you worried about the S&P 500? It's like,
well, we also have new members who perhaps aren't aware that we've answered the question over and over again.
Yeah,
so apologies,
apologies.
if you're new. If you're not new and you've been with us a few years, you should have heard before. But perhaps, Chris, you can just quickly go over this whole inflation, stagflation, hyperinflation sort of semantics and how they affect America, because that's the question that Demar's asking as well. And a sort of time frame for it.
Yeah, I mean, I like to always reference the Asian bird flu as an as a pretty good example of the inflation, deflation, stagflation debate, right? So what you had there was there's basically two meats that the Asians eat: pork and chicken. So the Asian flu came along and they said, okay, chickens are bad, let's slaughter them all. So they did. So you had a supply of chickens which went down. But guess what? The demand for chickens went down further. So the price of meat, of chicken meat, collapsed. So if you were in the chicken market, if you were long chicken futures, they don't exist, but let's pretend they did, then you would have been slaughtered, even though you saw the supply getting constrained massively. And of course, then people still want to eat. So pork futures went through the roof. Everybody wanted now pork. So all the farmers were like, okay, we need some pigs, and off you went. So the supply of pigs increased dramatically. But guess what? The price went higher. Why? Because the supply couldn't keep up with the demand. And so this is where, and the reason that I point this out was this was taking place while broadly the economy was in an inflationary environment. So it didn't really matter. The point I'm making is it didn't really matter whether you're in an inflationary environment or not. It could have been a deflationary environment, and that impact would have been exactly the same. Pork prices would have gone higher, chicken prices would have gone lower, while the supply and demand of those varying meats was doing what I just said they were doing, okay? Now, think about what we're buying. We're buying things which predominantly, not every time, but very often, are in an environment of supply constraint, or in the foreseeable future, such as shipping, have supply constraints. As Brad just eloquently highlighted, the order fleet is going to be replacing something like 5% over the next 5 years. That's a problem, okay? So that's the supply side. Now, demand could fall in that market, but if the supply, if you're replacing 5% and you're scrapping, let's just say for shits and giggles 20%, you got a 15% differential, right? If your demand falls by 10%, you still have a 5% differential in your favor. Prices are going to go higher. There'll be more margin expansion for those particular companies. Oi, shut up. Sorry, folks, that's not you, that's my dog. So the reason I point this out is that we're looking at all of these sectors which typically have these supply-demand variables. It's not that we're not paying attention to the broad economy, whether there's an inflationary bias, deflationary bias, or whatever. Our broad belief is that we're going to have a stagflationary environment, but realize that's not necessarily required, and it's not a predeterminer of our investment thesis. It's not like we say, okay, well, we've weighed all the options, we think it's stagflation, okay, what do we need to buy in stagflation? It's kind of the other way around. And when we look at the portfolio that we have, and we say, okay, looking, based on, again, supply, demand, very deep value, stuff that's been beaten up, left for dead, so on and so forth. When we look at that as a makeup, and then we go and we separately ask ourselves the question and say, okay, we think that it's likely to be a stagflationary environment. What are the asset classes that typically do well in that? We by and large look at things that, we mirror the portfolio. We're like, oh, okay, tick, 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 tick. Like, oh, okay, well, now we have, one could argue, a sort of a greater probability. But again, that's based on our assumption of a stagflationary environment. But guess what? Maybe we don't get that. Maybe it's full on deflation. Maybe it's full on inflation. So you're never going to have all of those answers. We will find out in a few years' time, and we will look back on this. But again, all investing is a matter of probability and trying to weigh those odds and then make a calculated, educated, smart decision around how you would build your portfolio to accommodate those risks.